All right, so welcome to episode 12 of the Never Better Pod, our final episode of season 1. Very excited for this one today. As we kind of teased last week, we've got a fun guest with us here today. So to start us off, I just wanted to do a quick little overview of what this first season has been all about here at the Never Better Pod. We're kind of focused on candid chats about mental health, life, and sometimes golf. We explore mindfulness, personal growth, and routines that keep us grounded. It's a space for reflection, support, and self-improvement. So far this season, we've covered topics like golf as a mindfulness practice, the complexities of masculinity, our experiences in relationship with alcohol, music as a mental health tool, mental health challenges of being sick. Then we reflected on our 2024 and set some intentions for 2025. We discussed the challenges of living with an invisible illness and its effect on your mental health, physical fitness and its importance for mental health. And then we kind of had 2 episodes where we chatted about current events and politics and climate crisis and things like that, because they're very much at the top of our minds. And then last episode, we discussed relationships with our partners, family, friends, and ourselves. So this is episode 12. We're joined today by Emily Brown, who is my therapist. So I'm very excited to have her here. We were
Oh, so we're saying that now.
Yeah, we're saying that now. We were previously colleagues, so it's been like a very nice and easy transition to going to therapy for the first time. For me, it's been fantastic. The conversations that her and I have had so far very much kind of aligned with Anthony and I starting this podcast and being a bit of an inspiration. And most of the knowledge that I've brought to this podcast is things I've basically just regurgitated for that Emily has taught me. So we thought we'd legitimize things a little bit here and bring her on. So welcome, Emily.
Yeah, Emily, it's been amazing to see how Dev has 180 since going to see you and learning all of the really cool things that you shared with him that I've been able to kind of steal as well. So yeah, thanks for taking the time to join us today.
I mean, that really warms my heart. I just, that's why I do it, for sure.
Yeah, Anthony's kind of been going to therapy through me and then through this podcast.
Listen, all my friends are in therapy now too.
You can bill me time and a half or something.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if we can move it forward in any way, I love that. I love that, like, you're talking to your friends about it. I mean, truly, that's why I do this. I really, for the longest time, I've just thought about, how we're going to make other people's lives better. We're in an existential crisis in the world, and like all we can control is our little pocket and who we impact. And I mean, that just makes me so happy to hear. Thank you for saying that.
Big time. At the end of the day, if all this has been a extended therapy session for Dev and I and our 20 other listeners, then it's a success for me.
But those 20 people will use something you say and talk to their 20 friends, and like you'll impact way more people than you think.
Appreciate that. That's the hope. Did you want to give us a little intro about your practice and who you are and everything before we hit you with the hard hitting questions?
Sure. I get the question. Did you tell them I have no idea what these questions are going to be? No
I didn't
prep.
mention that actually, but you said you preferred that. So
I know I prefer it, honestly. Like sometimes I feel like if I have rehearsed answers, it's so bad.
Yeah.
Okay, so I started this journey, man, so many years ago. So I was in the industry for a long time. I have my Bachelor of Commerce and my MBA. When I was doing my MBA, I was like, oh man, I'm really interested in the psychology piece of this. It was actually on Tiger Woods. We can talk about that later, Anthony, but I did an entire thesis on Tiger Woods, which is 100 pages long that nobody will ever read.
I won't read that. That sounds
great. Yeah. Send it our way.
Yeah. So then I went back and did my undergrad courses to get a master's of counseling. At this point, I'm pretty high up in the industry and I have a lot of school debt. So I just thought I was like, okay, I'm going to go to University of Athabasca because I want to do this at the same time of working full time to not have more debt. It worked out really well for me because COVID hit, but everything was online already for me. So I actually learned, which is really interesting, all the counseling I was doing at first was online. So it was weird for me to do in person. I was such a turnaround from other people that had to go online. It was strange for me to start doing in-person counseling. At some point I had to decide, like when I was kind of go full into this career. And like, I really, really loved the industry. I still do. And I still miss it. It's just doing 2 things at like 70%, right? So at some point I had to pick one. Your brain kind of tells you how scary, like things that are really scary, your brain will stop you from doing it. So it took me a long time to figure it out. Started with Okanagan Integrative Health at 0 clients. It was crazy. Last January, So January 2024. And you just don't realize how long in the industry, everything's almost at your fingertips kind of, and like right away. So instant gratification, I guess. So this was tough. I'm not going to lie to you guys. Like it took me a long time to build up my clientele. I have now, which is wonderful. But I would say like 8 months before I even broke even in like just money wise. And then a year now, like at a year, I'm very happy with where I am. But yeah, everything goes to your mind. I'm an imposter. I'm not good at this. Like I'm the brand and people don't like me. It's like there's a lot of everything that you guys feel as clients, I feel as a therapist. So I think my brand is very much like I'm a very messy person. I think everybody is messy. I think life is messy. And we just have to be really open and honest with each other about that. It's a really vulnerable style of counseling. I kind of, my main modalities are acceptance and commitment therapy. And then EMDR I'm now doing a little bit. I think you guys talked. Did you guys talk about EMDR at some point?
We didn't do it as like a full feature episode because I just
Yeah.
want to get some more information, but I'll
Yeah.
ask you to break it down at some point
Yeah, for sure.
today. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm really fascinated by neurodivergence. It runs in my family. It's something that I deal with literally actually in this podcast. I just dealt with it. Today with a client, I actually put 2 words together. What did I say? So it was like time and I don't know, money. And then I made it like to money. I do this all the time. I do very neurodivergent things in my session, but I will just say to my clients like, oh, that's my neurodivergence showing up. So that's kind of a part of, I feel like a lot of things I've gone through, people are going through, so I can relate. I don't know what else I can say about my brand. I think that's kind of it. Yeah.
Well, I think things are obviously going well because now I have to book with you like a month and a half in advance.
I'm so humble about it, Dev. Like I'm honestly like, it's so weird when people say that to me because I can't really believe it.
Yeah.
And it is weird to tell people who used to text me like, kind of have to like book in now. I'm so sorry. Like, yeah, it's really exciting. It's exciting. But then I have a brain just like everybody else where like when I'm in fight or flight, my brain says like, this is going to go away. Right. Like, it's like you have this like, as you know, yeah, it's so interesting. You're so humble and grateful for it. But then there's a little part of your brain when you go into fight or flight that it says like, you never know. Or like, what if this all turns around? And like, what if you go back to having 0 clients? Like, it's always going to try to protect me against like kind of what happened in those first 8 months. So it's been a fascinating journey.
Amazing. Huge congratulations to building a business. That's no small feat. And something that you said there just triggered me to ask this question is, how does your education in becoming a therapist affect how you approach your own problems? So obviously navigating, launching a new business, a lot of stress, a lot of negative brain conversation.
Yeah. That's hard. You hit me with a hard one fast. No, like you didn't want to like ease me into the question.
Definitely not.
Yeah, a lot of the skills, Anthony, it honestly depends on the day. Some days it's very fuck it. Like I consciously don't do the steps that I need to do to deal with it. Some of the days, I know when I'm in fight or flight now. So a big part of my practice is, and I joke about this all the time, that Dev has heard this, that I want to make merch that says like, you should have got back into homeostasis, bro. Because I do believe that like everything good happens in homeostasis. And then all the kind of stuff that kind of happens to us, anger, frustration, snapping at people, everything that goes on with our thoughts, catastrophizing, looking at things from the past too much, all happens in fight or flight. So the goal is never, to me, and I talk to my clients about this, to be happy or to like fall in. The goal is to be in fight or flight when your brain doesn't have to protect you. So I guess the number one thing I would say, Anthony, with dealing with this has been like, okay, I know what it feels like. Like I'm in fight or flight right now. I can feel it in my face. I've ticked up only a little bit just because we're doing this, but I know exactly what my levels of fight or flight are. So I know when my brain starts to, when I'm in fight or flight, because I know what it's like in my body, I know those thoughts aren't my reality, right? I very much know it's a brain that's trying to protect me. So I'll say, like when my brain was saying in those first 8 months, like, what if you never do this? What if you never get busy? I'm like, okay, my brain is trying to protect me. I get it, but I believe in myself and in my heart, I believe in what I'm doing and I love this and I just have to stay the course. That makes sense?
Total sense. Amazing. But that sounds like self-awareness. And I'm sure a lot of your clients come to you with like amazing self-awareness, yet they can't break through. So how do you do that? Or do you have a therapist of your own?
Yes, I do. Yeah. How do you break through which part?
Like that block that you come to. So again, I'm making some assumptions, but do you have clients that come in and they self-diagnose themselves to a T and they're like, I just need to do this. This is what's triggering me. This is my fight
Yeah.
or flight. This is what puts me back into homeostasis. They can lay it all out, but that
Yeah.
doesn't mean that they can put it into practice. So you are armed with all of the knowledge that you could ever need. Are you always able to put it into practice? And no.
Of course not. Yeah. I actually told this story more often than not, yes, which is nice. And it's also like the 10,000 hour rule. I sometimes wish ignorance was bliss. Sometimes I wish my brain, like someone will say something to me and I get activated and I wish I could blame it on the other person. But now my brain is like, you're just jealous. And I'm like, oh, like sometimes like that amount of knowledge is frustrating. But yes, there will be sometimes where I'm caught in fight or flight. And it actually just happened at work the other day. And then I'll talk to you about like little things my clients can do. But I was activated by something that a coworker had said for no real like I know when I'm activated, but I know I don't have to figure it out till later. So I was like, oh, I got up. The first thing I do is like I exit, right? Any words being said when you're activated, any fast finger typing, any fast finger emails, do not send it. Like that was the number one thing I did. If there is one thing people can remember from this podcast, stop fast fingering anything because you are absolutely in fight or flight. Right. So I left, but the coworker followed me and was like, oh, are we good? And I'm like even embarrassed to tell this story actually, but this is classic. Without even thinking about it, I just said, you're taking it out on me because I'm a woman and I don't like that. Like so mean. And like instantly after I said it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. I am in fight or flight. I did not do that. Right. Like the things that we say in fight or flight, like your logical prefrontal cortex brain is turned off, right? It's your emotional and limbic brain. It's only based in emotion. It's not you. It's not who you are. And so when we say these things when we're in fight or flight, and then of course the guilt, right, is almost immediate. Like, why did I say that? Am I actually a mean person? Do I have problems with anger? No, you just are in fight or flight more than you're not. That kind of makes sense. Did that answer your question?
Total sense. Amazing.
Yeah.
Good.
So I really believe that mental health is not like, you cannot let your foot off the gas, much like physical health, right? Where you're never just going to be like, I'm good. I have the body of my dreams. I will stop going to the gym. Right. And it's the exact same thing with mental health. If I take my foot off the gas, if I stop noticing, I will go right back into my old patterns. Your brain loves an old pattern, right? It wants to suck you back in bad. So when it gets a chance to, it absolutely will. I'm lucky that I've just built a lot of new patterns that my brain is used to, right?
That really resonates with me in terms of, like I say, building those new patterns to get out of those situations where you can feel that anxiety rising or whatever it is. So I know like we've done a lot of work on this, but could you break down like just super simple basics of like what should somebody be practicing if they start to then recognize that feeling? For me, that was like the tough part at the beginning, like recognize what's going on first. And then once you know that anxiety is creeping up or whatever, like what are some things you can do to then try and get back down to homeostasis?
Into homeostasis, yeah. I think something I want to touch on for you guys too, because I know you focus on what kind of goes on with men. And I find like a trend, which has been so fascinating for me is, and I get it, like it's not like any of us were ever told like lean into your emotions, which is what goes on into your body, right? But especially men growing up, it was never like, okay, where do you feel anger in your body? What is that? Like there was never any of that really awareness of the somatic body. So it's really, I will have a lot of clients, and it's been an interesting trend that are like, I don't go into fight or flight ever. Like, I don't know what that feels like. What are you even talking about? I'm like, I think you're in fight or flight right now because you feel irritated, right? And so like even irritation is fight or flight. But if you have no idea kind of what's going on in your body, you really don't know what fight or flight is or feels like. And you just assume like, I have an anger problem. I'm easy to snap, right? Like I'm, all these things that people kind of come in and say. And it's like, no, all it is like being aware that like irritation or frustration or being annoyed with your partner, that's fight or flight. And even that alone can change someone's perspective. But yes, when you're in it. So step one is noticing. Noticing is tough. Like all these things I'm going to say, what I say to my clients is like, they seem very simple, but they're extremely hard to do. Simple is not easy. So like noticing what happens in your body is like when you go into fight or flight and words coming out of your mouth, those are like 2.3 seconds apart. So I'm asking you to find that point that's like a really small point in the body reacting out loud. So the noticing is tough. But when you do notice what it is, it's really like, okay, I'm in fight or flight right now. What are different ways that I can like bring my nervous system down? The tricky part about this is where the science kind of comes in. So there's hyperarousal and hypoarousal. I use my hands a lot, Anthony, so be prepared for that. Devlin's used to this. And then, for no reason whatsoever. And then there's like homeostasis. When you're in fight or flight, in homeostasis, you need to kind of come back down. But sometimes we go into cold and hold. So what cold and hold is it's like the third part. If you think of kind of the way our brain and body works, if you couldn't fight or if you couldn't run, your body would just kind of freeze and you would go cold, right? And then you would go numb. So that's hypoarousal. So the interesting about hypoarousal is you need to bring your nervous system back up. So first things first is kind of realizing like what your mechanisms of fight or flight are. Do you like get really angry? Do you disappear and shut down? Do you get like really cold and you can't even speak, right? So once you know that, there's different ways of bringing it back up. I mean, obviously movement is going to be a big one. It's one that everybody talks about, right? And then there's things like anything cold exposure, just because cold exposure will turn on your nervous system, like your vagal nerves, right? So it will, when you hold, literally as simple as holding 2 ice cubes in your hands, when you're doing that, it's really hard for your brain to keep ruminating, to keep cycling. When you do cold, I always do my face in like a really cold thing of water because it's really hard. Try to have anxiety while you're doing that. It's tough, right? I tell my clients to go walk today would be a perfect day to walk in the snow for 10 seconds, barefoot. Like it'll instantly bring you kind of back. Laughter hijacks your nervous system. If you know the videos that make you laugh, if I tell you something really funny right now and you guys laugh, again, try to like stay in the fight or flight mode. It's really hard. So I have my little go-tos when it comes to anything with your senses. But when you're noticing, one word, if you guys can take from this, is just notice, right? If I am in fight or flight and like my brain is kind of starting to come at me and I'm like, okay, Anthony, I'll talk, poor Deb. I talk about 5 senses walks. I don't know, like 75 times a day. It's just it probably gets annoying. But if you go outside and you notice, right, like what do the trees look like? Like what does that owl sound like? Like what is actually going on with the water? I can't notice and be in fight or flight at the same time. So, and what you're doing by continuing to go on these walks, by continuing to engage your senses, is you're training your attention so that now you can, like, once you start training it and training it and training it, you can start doing that in situations where you couldn't in the past, right? So now if you're having a fight with your partner, you're like, okay, I notice I'm in fight or flight. I'm going to train my attention back into the moment, and then I'm going to come back to this conversation. I go on really strange tangents, so I hope
not a tangent at all. That sounds great. Like a lot of CBT practices to get back to homeostasis. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. CBT and ACT are under ACT and CBT are under the same umbrella of behavioral mechanisms. So what's interesting about those two is basically acceptance and commitment therapy is kind of about noticing your thoughts. That you can't really control your thoughts or your emotions and you just notice them and your feelings. CBT is about like, okay, this is the thought and I'm actually going to cognitively reframe it, right? Reframe the thought, or I'm going to match the thought with an action I can take. But both principles are very much like the only thing that you can control are your actions or your behaviors. And like, we're not going to try to control our thoughts and our emotions. And this is the coolest part to me of like therapy, and two things can be true. Once you can say in your brain, like, or say to yourself, like, man, I'm so grumpy. All my brain is telling me to do is just to stay in bed and to not go to my workout and to kind of fuck the world, but I'm just going to do it anyways. Man, that changes the game, right? Because then you're always controlling this part, your actions, you're being kind, you're going to work, you're going and doing your workout, even if this exists. But our brain loves to either or, right? So if I'm grumpy, then I might as well, pick a fight with my partner, not go to the gym, and then like the day's gone to shit, right? But that's how kind of our brain hooks us. So once we start observing versus participating, we kind of take that power back.
I had that exact moment in that second job interview I just had recently when I walked into the room and I was meeting with like four other people. I'd only met one of them before, and I got there a little bit early because I'm trying to do that now, be better at time management. But then they ended up like sitting me in the conference room, and they were all like running around, like printing off my resume and doing whatever. And I was just sitting there with my thoughts. And by the time they all came and like sat down, I was like, I feel like I'm going to throw up. Like I was like, I got to run out of the room or I'm going to throw up. But then like I had that moment of like, oh, I'm just nervous. Like I'm feeling anxious because I'm just nervous, which is totally normal in this situation. I'm in a job interview. I was like, just take a deep breath. You don't need to run away. You're not going to throw up. Like you're literally just nervous. And that process of just naming it, I felt better and got through the rest of it fine. It's so weird how it works. And it seems like it's too simple to make sense, but it works. It's crazy.
Yeah. It's the idea of like simple, hard, but simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so weird.
I know, it's so weird. And even like when so sometimes with first clients, I'll be like, all I want you to do right now is to start to notice. And you almost can like feel the eye roll of like, okay, like, yeah. And you're like,
Yeah.
and I always say like, I'll see you in 2 weeks and you're going to tell me that was a game changer, right? Because we mostly are in autopilot. Like a really cool thing I heard on a podcast recently is like, if we think we know something, we go into autopilot and we stop noticing. And that fundamentally will become a problem, right? Because then your brain just starts to like decide the future and create scenarios and decide. It's like marriages. When you think you know your partner fully, you already are gonna prophesize what they're gonna do, how they're gonna act, and inevitably it's becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we always notice, in a perfect world, we wake up every day and we don't know anything, right? And we notice everything. We notice our toothpaste. It sounds ridiculous, but we notice how the water feels in the shower. We notice 3 new things about our partner. We notice 3 new things about where we live that we think we know fully. That is a game changer. Noticing is what puts you in the present moment, always.
Noticing makes a lot of sense and sounds more tangible. What about trusting your thoughts? And then I had a question that might fit in here. I was going to do it later, but in terms of relationships, this concept that horrifies me is ADHD limerence.
Well, I don't actually know what that is.
Okay, so yeah, this like concept of love bombing, like putting someone on a pedestal as an ADHD response.
Okay.
Yeah.
So first thing, what do you mean about trusting your thoughts? Talk to me about that first.
And this isn't specific to me necessarily, but the concept of trusting your thoughts. So someone that's experiencing ADHD limerence would have this greatly exaggerated feeling in like a feelings that are exaggerated, like a greater sense of love than you should have in that moment. So your chemicals, your brain is feeding you a feeling that is untrue.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe like an easier example for it. I saw something about this on Instagram this morning, I think it was, but it was this like idea of how you like say your partner gets up and gets out of bed and doesn't say good morning to you because like, and they're just in a rush or something, like they've got to get to work. But in your mind, you're like, oh, why didn't they say good morning? And you start like negative spiraling about that. Like, I think Anthony's example is
That's
like
a
kind
good
of
example
more
of trusting your thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So then, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I can talk to a lot of this. So with ADHD, your brain reuptakes dopamine faster, right? So I think we're talking about the same thing when we're talking about like with love or any sort of like thing that provides a quick dopamine hit, right? Any sort of substance. Love can actually be a part of that for sure too. Doom scrolling on Netflix or doom scrolling on your phone or being on Netflix too long. Food. All of this provides a dopamine hit, right? When you're on the spectrum or neurodivergent in any kind of way, you reuptake dopamine faster. So what happens is you feel like you need more and more and more, right? So when people say, you have reactivity issues or impulse control issues, it's not that. It's just dopamine. And when you start to realize that and you start to figure out like, okay, and I'm going to come back to trusting your thoughts. I'm going to go backwards. When you start to realize what happens in your brain, like it's really cool because then you can be like, okay, where am I searching for dopamine? And then where can I find slow release dopamine activities, right? So for me in the industry, and I'm like very open and honest with this, there's a lot of things that I did for dopamine, and as everyone does in the industry, and everything about the industry is kind of dopamine, right? Like the quickness of service, the money in your hands instantly, the substances, it's all there. And so, but what happens is, Anthony, is that Dev and I have talked about this. We always talk about in the end, you want all your actions and your behaviors to line up with your values, right? You always do. And when we're getting these dopamine hits, inevitably, if you're doing things if your actions in those moments don't line up with your values, you're not going to feel good about that. You're going to feel guilt. You're going to feel like, but you're not really going to realize that. Step one or the foundational piece is always coming back to like who you are in your heart and what you value. And that is what you can trust. And I don't believe that we can trust our thoughts for kind of 3 reasons. Our brain is always trying to protect us. Number 1 thing, it's going to protect you at all costs, survival, right? Number 2 is it loves a pattern. Number 3 is there's a fear there. It's not necessarily a fear of the unknown. It's what your brain places in the unknown, right? So our brains will say things to us like, if your brain is like in a little bit of you is scared that your partner's going to leave you because something has happened to you in the past that it's protected you from, your brain will say, if she walks away, she's going to leave you. You're going to be alone. Then you're going to be alone forever. Then you're probably not going to have kids. Then you're going to die alone. Our brain is so good at placing in the unknown what we're kind of scared of, like our fears or our insecurities, right? So I always say to people, I'm never going to argue with you about if your thoughts are real or not real. I'm just going to ask you if your thoughts are working. Are your thoughts leading to actions that line up with your values? Are your thoughts bringing you towards the person that you want to be, the life that you want to live, the belief system that you have? That's what we focus on. More, not like, is this a real thought? Because I think we can get a little bit in the gray in that kind of situation, right? So it's more just like, is this lining up with who I am? Did that kind of answer your question?
That's a super helpful distinction. I like it.
Thank you.
Do you know the role that dopamine plays in fight or flight?
Yes.
Yeah.
So basically, there's no real, so dopamine is pleasure reward system, right? So cortisol is fight or flight. So the scientific connection between cortisol and dopamine, I'm unsure of, but I know there is a dopamine hit in fight or flight, right? There is. And that's why when people say, oh, like you're addicted to chaos, that's not true. No one's addicted to chaos. It's just like a fight or flight and a dopamine response, right? And it's just the pattern of it. And I still get to this day, I'll get pulled towards it. Like my brain will whisper things to me, right? Like, you have 85 drinks. I don't anymore. But there's like, there's things that our brain will do for that instant. I have a little game on my phone. I know when my brain is craving dopamine, but I found ways to do things that don't hurt the people I love or hurt me, right? Inevitably, if I come home and have 85 drinks, I'm probably not going to be a great therapist the next day. I'm probably going to miss my workout. I'm going to be probably snappy with my partner. So that's not going to work. That doesn't line up with my values. But if I play my little game on my phone, that's literally just putting dots together, right? I'll be fine. And so it's figuring out what works for you for dopamine. I love researching things. So for me, like I still stay up till 2, 3 at night sometimes because I like get a dopamine. I'm a late night dopamine person. That's kind of where I know I need it the most. But I'm just researching. I'm just looking up things on ChatGPT, and then I'm like going somewhere else and looking up this and then looking up the brain and attaching it to psychology and looking up philosophy. So so it's not hurting anyone. It's still the dopamine. It's a slower release dopamine, but it's still dopamine nonetheless. So that's where that awareness piece comes in of figuring out like what time of day do you need it? What actions do you take sometimes for that dopamine that aren't kind of lining up with the person you are? What could you do instead? A lot of trial and error, for sure. A lot of mental health is trial and error.
Mm-hmm. Great.
One of the things that came up in one of our recent podcasts was we were talking about big T and little t trauma. And I was saying, like, I had this idea in my mind that therapy was really about targeting those big T traumas. And then you and I had a little bit of a breakthrough with a little T trauma for me. And it like really blew my mind, and it totally shifted my perspective in terms of like what we were working on and how we were achieving different things. And I think Anthony asked a question, kind of what the difference is. And like, I was wondering if you could talk to that, to that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, big T is like, obviously those moments. I mean, yeah, they're just like very traumatic things that happen to us in our lives. A parent dying, and potentially like a sexual assault, war would be a big T. Anything, and an attack, like anything where your survival, like your brain thought that you might, like your survival, right? It's a survival mechanism. Yeah, there's so many things that happen to us right now with big T traumas in the world. Little T, it's like so strange. Like, Anthony, have you ever had that, like, you remember that one thing from grade 3 that Charlie said to you? And you're like, why do I have this memory of this one thing this one kid said that I'm not even friends with? Because it was a little T trauma. So the little T traumas are like those things that people say that you're like, oh, okay, like that somehow from that one person, that one thing, you've internalized it. And there's a maladaptive belief that's come up from it. And you probably don't even know it. Sometimes little T traumas are things you didn't get, but you need it. Right. So it's like, it's not even potentially an overt thing that somebody said. It could have been just like, one time it's something as simple as like, your parents' parenting style is kind of like do it yourself and like just kind of letting you go and do it. Cause sometimes that was a parenting style, not knowing that you needed a little bit of soothing. And so you kind of just started to be like, okay, like I have to do everything on my own. Right. Like, and you internalize that, but not even knowing you're internalizing that.
Is it always linked to that like worldview building aspect? Like my little T trauma thing that we worked through was very much, I found, linked to my idea of how I should be and my, like, almost my values even. Is it always linked to that, or is that just an example?
I think it's like, man, there's so many that it can be, right? Like it's if you ever made some decisions when you were young and a couple of them didn't go your way, and then suddenly your brain was like, okay, you can't trust your own judgment. right? So those would have been little, and then your whole life, you feel like I can't trust my own judgment, which sometimes presents as like indecisiveness, right? A lot of like, I'm not good enough or I'm unlovable. It's like, it just really depends on what your brain needed to protect you from as you were going through your life. They can happen at any point in our lives, right? If our brain never, in a perfect world, which is not happening for anybody at this point, if you never had to protect yourself from anything, if you were never in fight or flight, there's no maladaptive beliefs there, right? But at some point, something little or big happens to you and your brain decides like, I need to protect this person from that. How that happens is like, okay, well, like, and it's like detective work, like basically like, you're not good enough. And you have to look out for when you're not good enough. Our brains, it's like, it's trying to do the best it can, right? Now we're looking out for all these places that we're not good enough and we're going to find it because our brain loves to confirm what we believe. So I always love to thank my brain kind of in a sense of like, it's trying to protect me and it's doing the best it can, but the thoughts are simply not working for me.
It just made me think of, I think a like little T trauma for me is that when I was younger and like in elementary school and stuff, there were some times when I feel like I maybe like didn't have a super great teacher or whatever. And there were times where you put literally everything into like a project or something. You stayed up all night and I got so much help from my parents. And you're like, I did this perfectly. And then it seemed like there was a situation where like this one teacher would always find a reason, like not like to downgrade your mark a little bit. And it's like, oh, you printed this on a computer and I didn't say you could do that. You're supposed to write it in handwriting or whatever, all these different kinds of things. And I think the lasting impact that's had on me is like now it's very rare that I'll put 100% of myself into something. I'll put in like 90%. And then when I get 86% on something, I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, I only put in 90%. So that makes sense.
It's crazy that
Yeah, it's so weird. So the next thing that came up with that discussion is like, okay, what do I do with that information now?
Okay, so what's cool about when you figure out what your maladaptive beliefs are is like, I guess I'll just use a personal example so I don't talk about anybody else. So from a young age, obviously I'm a big personality, right? I feel my feelings. I have since I was born. So I was kind of always told I was too much something, right? Like cry too much, kind of like talked too much. I've been told before, everything was a bit too much, was too emotional. So I internalized that as bad, like a bad thing. And so anytime that kind of, once I figured out that was my maladaptive belief, now what's cool about that is that if I go into a severe, because usually with maladaptive beliefs, the fight or flight is ticked up pretty high. Like for me, it's like a punch in my rib cage. That's what I call it. I always call it like when you see Keanu Reeves in Matrix, like going slow-mo backwards, that's what a big amount of fight or flight feels like to me. So when I feel that, you can kind of go through your brain and say, was it what the person said, or is it kind of bucking up against my maladaptive belief? And once you know that, it really changes the game. So a good example is, I don't know why all my examples are with my coworkers. I had another coworker because we always just chat in the back, I guess, with another coworker, and this coworker was just chatting and just said, oh, like your brain moves way too fast for me. I'm like, boom, fight or flight, just from the word to, like literally from the word TOO. And so instead of being like, fuck that guy, because that's honestly what I would have done in the past. Like, he's rude, he's insulting me. I'm going to like exit this conversation because I was an icer out. So I'm a flight after I say really mean things. So I guess I have both in me. But I ultimately would have just like, like shut right down and exited the conversation and just blamed the coworker, right? That's like what our brains want to do. But I was like, okay, I think that this is because the word to has been said. I think this is probably like activating my maladaptive belief that I'm just too much, too big. I'm just going to sit in this conversation and like let this kind of exist while my words line up with my values. So like 2 minutes later, the coworker goes, oh, you just probably think I'm like talking to Eeyore. And I had like an aha moment because I'm like, holy fuck, this is two people with two maladaptive beliefs that like are having a perfectly normal conversation that could have gone awry based on like us not knowing that. Like this person just thinks they're like not smart enough. I think I'm too much. Like it was so cool. And like I could say to this person, like, no, not at all. Like I like as someone with neurodivergence, I love people's brains who like slow down and methodically think. Like so I could kind of help that person with their maladaptive belief. It was just a really cool moment. Like once you know them, you really start to understand like nothing that anybody does it's about me. It's about my insecurities, my fears. It's never about them. I mean, it's really hard to get mad at anyone else ever again, which like I said, sometimes is frustrating because you're always reflecting, but it really does like change your life.
That's a good example of like when I think about trying to navigate a relationship with someone. And if you're trying to communicate something is to frame your grammar in a way of like in that example, instead of him saying like, oh, you're being too much right now, him saying like, I can't keep up with you, like frame it from the way that you're feeling instead of putting it on the other person. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And communication is such a big part of this, right? And I really believe in that kind of stuff, Deb. I believe in anytime I'm trying to have a vulnerable conversation with someone, I'll always go like, this is what my brain is telling me, or this is what my mind is saying. So I'm not saying you are this, right? I'm saying this is what my brain is saying to me, so that that person can say immediately, that's not what I meant at all, right? It's such a different approach than like, you did this to me, or like, you are this, like, and that will put people into fight or flight immediately. Like, I really think that the nuances of how we communicate and the words that we use and the tone is really important.
Totally agree. And specifically, I've been interested in how to navigate that with new parents and their children. Have you been doing much 2 a.m. research on that? And like, maybe if you have, you could recommend some of the best literature on like psychology for new parents and babies.
Yeah.
Can you put this out for me? I think that obviously there's no handbook for our parents. And I do feel like I've gained some positive resilience due to the negatives of that. So what's a 2025 parenting style that lets these little babies be supportive and perfect, but also not too unhindered that they don't develop any coping mechanisms?
Yeah. I mean, are you asking for like newborns?
Uh,
So
no. Like raising a kid.
okay. Yeah, to be like, oh, we can get into attachment styles for sure. I think that really for kids, my number one thing when I'm doing, therapy with kiddos is that when we were raised, God bless our poor parents, they didn't have a hope in hell, honestly. Like, I got so much empathy for boomers. But anyways, it's like we were kind of taught what? 4 emotions, kind of, right? Kind of like happy, sad, mad. Right. So we never knew when we were in school, grade 1 and 2, and we didn't know that that's jealousy or that's shame or that's embarrassment. Right. And so I always find like when with kids, sometimes we think we need to discipline something out of them versus like if there's emotional reactivity, if something's going on, if they're acting out, there's a skill they're missing. And that's what we need to focus on. Right. Are they not able to put their emotions into words because they don't know how to name them? Are they not able to understand what's going on in the body? Are they not able to like have, like, if there's something missing, and like the skill set is what we need to think about. And like to start with kids is like really from a very young age, I'll give them like, those faces and you can like color them in. So I get parents to have that every night and to be like, okay, what were you feeling at school today? And there's 12 of them. So there is like all the different emotions, right? And then like now, honestly, that movie has really helped us out. It has. Because all the kids will immediately go, what is that movie I'm talking about?
Like the Inside Out?
Yeah, Inside Out. Yeah. So the kids will go to the colors of Inside Out, which is cute. And the new movie has different feelings on it, which is great. But it's like, it's really neat. Like once kiddos realize like what is going on in their body and can name it, it's like that is the awareness we can start with our kids young. For like things we had to learn at 35, like, oh yeah, that's shame. Shit, I wish I knew that 15 years ago, right? It's like they can learn from a very young age. And then we can really validate them in that feeling. Like I really believe in unconditional positive regard. And that doesn't mean like no discipline whatsoever, but like I will love you no matter what forever. Like, and that's unconditional, right? There are no conditions for that. And I will give you all the tools you can to, successfully communicate, to understand what's going on in your body, to understand emotion and to understand anxiety and why it exists, but like really validate you at the same time.
At what point does that cross over into the negative of like being told that you can do anything, like the dynamic of the prodigal child?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a tricky one for me because I do think the world is going to come down on you immediately. Like the world out there is really hard, right? So I do believe as parents that like I do really believe in unconditional positive regard. I see what you're saying. I think there's a way to believe in our kids without kind of like diving into the ego piece, right? Because like that kind of prodigal child stuff is kind of based in fight or flight or ego, whereas like really bringing someone up from your heart, right? It's like to me based in like empathy and kindness and staying humble. It's based in different things. So I think there's a difference between Yeah, it's kind of such a nuanced thing for me to talk about. Does that make it's kind of
That's one where I could jump in because I know Anthony and I had this conversation recently is because and this was kind of tied to that little T trauma thing that you and I discovered with myself is like that the way that my parents raised me at this like positive, you can do anything, you're so great, like very, very positive, super good. But then what ended up happening to me is like the challenges that I've been through within the last year made me feel like I was failing. Then I felt like I was, like failing them. And it added on all these layers of things because I felt like I wasn't achieving everything that I wanted to achieve and I wasn't being great and whatever. And so it was tied with that. But the difference is that once we talked about it and I knew that all of those things that they were saying that led to this, sort of maybe a negative thing for me. Once I had that thought and like really processed it properly and realized all of that stuff that they were saying really only came from a place of love from them and there was nothing negative tied to it, then all of a sudden it just like poofs into thin air and it's better. And I've accepted my feelings and like why I felt that way and how that's affected me negatively. So like, I think there's no way that we're ever going to go through life and avoid anything negative. It's how you deal with it when things come up.
Yeah, and I think when you come back, like it always has to come from within. I think if at any point in your life, so maybe this can speak to what you're talking about too, Anthony. If success was connected to by your parents, maybe in a big T way, like good grades or you suck, or in a little T way, like, oh, we're only putting good report cards on the fridge, is that if success was tied to something external to you, that is inevitably going to probably create a maladaptive belief or perfectionism or people pleasing or these kind of things, right? Where we think that our success is about good grades or lots of views on a podcast or money, right? Like things that are external to us. As a parent, like I think it's always like with your kiddos, like you're going to have value and self-worth regardless. That's like one simple sentence, but it means regardless of your grades, regardless of your successes in the outer world, you will always have value. You will always have worth. And I think that's, if you always kind of bring it back to who they are as a person, what's in their heart, what they value, versus kind of tying their success with things outside of them.
That's good. Teaching self-awareness as soon as you can. And yeah, great. Awesome. This is a different question. I'm curious about your opinion on the increase of armchair expert therapy people on social media, ourselves included. And then one step further from that, I see a lot of content about personality disorders specifically, like everyone just name and you're a narcissist, you're a narcissist. So your thoughts on that content. And then third, final question, prevalence of personality disorders in your practice. And are those people typically aware going in or are you diagnosing?
No like questions today.
Yeah.
So I can't, so no RCC, registered clinical counselor, can diagnose. Nor can a therapist in Alberta, it's only psychiatrists.
Gotcha.
So you can only diagnose if you go to med school and then you become a psychiatrist, right? So when it comes to any of those kind of things where you need a diagnosis, and I'm very clear about that with all my clients, I will never diagnose. Do they come in self-diagnosed? Absolutely. Instagram is so funny to me. I never know really, Kathy, you'll find this about me. I never really have a stance. And I don't mean to not stand for anything, but I'm always kind of that person that's like sees both sides, or I always say two things can be true at the same time, right? Do I think that those words are getting overused or maybe just like hijacked by Instagram? Yes. But does it create awareness about mental health? It absolutely does, right? So
what about when it gets hijacked to like hyper alpha masculinity?
Ooh. I mean, this is what's so tough is that mood disorders they're all so similar. And they all have so many similar traits and characteristics. Like if you look into them, it's like, and hypoarousal is so similar to depression, is so similar to having low estrogen as a female in hormones. It's all right. It's so hard to me to say you are this or that is that, right? Because they are all intrinsically I don't really believe in body and mind, right? Everything is so linked intrinsically. And so, yeah, it is really hard. Instagram is or any social media, I don't know, I keep saying it, like TikTok, it's a really hard place. I really believe that we do kind of overuse those words, but I also believe that a diagnosis can be really powerful if you were dealing with something your entire life and you didn't know, right? And then you can diagnose it. So it's really hard for me to have an opinion one way or the other, not because I don't want to not stand for it, but because it really always, and I think this is my client-centered approach, so neurodivergent runs in my family, and so I definitely know that, but I've never needed a diagnosis of ADHD. I could definitely go and get one. I've put on one sock before and then walked around the house and done 4 other things before putting on my other sock. Like, this exists for me, but I don't necessarily need that label. But if you do, but some people really do, right? And it feels really rewarding to be like, okay, this is why my brain does this. So it's always based on the person if you want to get a diagnosis. I'm not anti or pro diagnosis at all. It's just based on what will work best for you and what will help you understand the most. The word stuff is tough. It's like gaslighting and like love bombing and narcissism. It's tough. They do get thrown around, and it's like, yeah, those are strong words. Those are very strong words. I just don't know. It's like, that's kind of the society we're in right now, right?
Okay. Let me narrow down your stance slightly here. Breaking down the stigma, increasing the conversation on the positive, but at risk of misinformation and people who don't know what they're talking about stuff they don't know what they're talking.
Yeah.
You'd rather have it being discussed overall better.
This is yeah, I think I'm gonna say yes, because I really hope that once people build their self-awareness, they understand that nothing is necessarily true. I mean, I'm a very existential person. Like, sometimes I don't even believe the table in front of me exists. So this is a different conversation, but that if you're reading something, I hope that you're someone who doesn't think like that is a hard truth. Right. And like, we do live in a world. Yes, social media has increased our access to everything, but we have to be very aware that that doesn't necessarily mean what we are watching on TV, what we are reading is true. And to kind of not only do your own kind of searches, but also, like, again, like, coming back to, like, is that information working for you? Does that help you? Does that bring you towards the person you want to be? Does that fit with your values? Versus, like, am I just going to believe this thing and believe it's true and then that's it? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you anti and for people talking about it if they don't know about it?
No, I'm not at all, but that's where my imposter syndrome gets triggered. And so now I'm asking the pro, going right to the source. And I'm glad that, even though I had to force this answer out of you, that breaking down the stigma and increasing the prevalence of the conversation is good. So we'll try not to spread information.
That bodes well for us continuing to do this podcast.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
Guys, like, there's so much growth in failure, right? And there's so much growth in, like, if I say something wrong, I used to be so scared of saying the wrong thing to my clients, like, terrified, right? Same thing, imposter syndrome. But then, like, the more neurodivergent clients you have, the more they're going to say to you, I don't like what you said. Like, just straight up, right? Like, and they, like I get that all the time because I love working with neurodivergent clients. They're like, that doesn't work for me, or like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Please explain that in a better way. But the more and more you go through that, the more you decide, like, this is not personal. This is how their brain processes information. This is how this tone works. This is how they get the most out of it. And you kind of stop taking that stuff personally. It's just like, we're all going to make mistakes in what we say. We're all messy human beings. And then we learn from it. And then we're better for it, right? If I missay something in therapy, or like someone brings up something I don't understand, the minute you brought up a word that I didn't know, I was in fight or flight. Because I'm like, that's my, like, kind of perfectionism mechanism. I'm like, okay, I'm on podcast and he just brought up something I've never heard before. And I would have, like, probably Emily of a couple of years ago would have just flown off the deep end with that into my own head and have that imposter syndrome type stuff. But now I'm like, okay, I'm going to chat GPT that tonight at 2 a.m. and I'm going to figure out what he's talking about and I'm going to learn from it. And once we really decide that, it's like, yeah, like, we are in a world where we're so quick to kind of come at people versus just like, yeah, it's tough because it's like, man, we all make mistakes. Like, we're all fucking up left, right, and center because we're in fight or flight. And like, there's so many reasons to be in fight or flight right now in the world. And like, if we really kind of conceptualize, like, that person who's yelling at you or who's having a bad day getting their coffee or who like cuts you off in traffic, once you're like, that person's just in fight or flight, like, you kind of really stop taking things personally. And then you are the person who stops getting like mad at other people for misinformation. That kind of makes
Totally. Well, at 2 a.m. when you search ADHD limerence, maybe it turns out it's not even a real thing. And I learned it from some Instagram person who just...
I am in an ADHD course right now, which is really cool. An acceptance commitment therapy one, an 8-week long one. when I'm done it, if I haven't heard that word yet, I'm going to let you know.
Yeah, please do. Please do. I am definitely a self-diagnosed ADHDer here for sure, but a neurodivergence, super trendy term right now. And I think that like everything is gray and we're so obsessed with the black and white. I've yet to meet someone who I can identify as neurotypical. I can't, but feel like we're all on a spectrum of neurodivergence. Similarly to, I feel like we're all on a spectrum of attention.
Yeah. Smart. Yeah, I completely agree with you. And then if you really want to dive further into that is like, what is neurotypical and who decided what neurotypical was and at what year and at what time? What is normal and who decided that? Right? Like, I don't even believe normal exists. I don't really talk in, Helen always runs up against this with me, but I don't really love to talk in dualisms. And just because it's like, when did someone decide what was good and what was bad? Right. And like, when did like cultural constructs, societal constructs, they impact us all the time. And really, in the end, it's like, is that working? That's why I always come back to, is that working for you? Because you'll have people come in and be like, you know, like, I don't have the money that I was supposed to have, and I don't have the house, and I don't, but what made you decide that's what you wanted? Do you actually want those things? Or did culture make you believe that you needed to have those things, right? Or like a lot with men is like this idea of like, you have to provide. And if you don't provide, like there's something wrong with you, right? And so there's these constructs that we deal with that make us feel like we're good or bad, positive or negative, like, and it's just not true, right? It's not true. Everything is a spectrum. Like, Anthony, we can really get into it because I don't know any, sometimes I think about like what is actually real and what isn't. That's in my like 4 a.m.
Gotcha. Do you still go on to sleep 8 hours after that bedtime?
Yeah, yeah, probably. Yeah, I don't let like, I should not be up at 3 a.m. because my mind just boom.
We're doing pretty good for a dime here, but I want to keep things moving along very quickly before we move on to our weekly affirmations. We said we would talk about it earlier, but Emily, can you just give us a real quick breakdown on what EMDR is?
Yes. Okay. So it's a neurobiological approach to therapy. What's cool about EMDR is it's used a lot with first responders. So sometimes people don't really want to talk about their trauma. And I sometimes feel with trauma, people have been asked to talk about it multiple times, right? And it's not easy to talk about. And sometimes people can't even find the words. So the simplest way to put it is that when these big T or little T traumas happen and they're connected to these maladaptive beliefs, it gets stuck in your emotional or limbic brain. It gets stuck in your nervous system. And so that's why there's like a large surge of emotion in the body, even when you think about it, when you talk about it, when anything like that. So we tend to suppress it. But that's where the Gabor Mate work comes in of like the body always keeps score, right? So the idea is when we continue to suppress, we are putting our system into fight or flight by doing that. And like that's going to lead to, you know, I do believe the mind and body are connected. So a lot of fight or flight all the time will lead to physical like illness, autoimmune, that kind of stuff. Your cells can't fight anything off. So what we do is bilateral stimulation in any sort, like me going like this and your eyes following me would be bilateral. Anything like this where tapping comes in, I have like little buzzers. It turns on your prefrontal cortex. And so now, so what we're doing is we get you to, we kind of put you in a fight or flight and we talk about memories of that event while doing bilateral stimulation. And so what we're doing is we're desensitizing the memory for you and then we're reprocessing it into your prefrontal cortex so that it doesn't, it's not like you're going to forget it. It's not hypnotism. I know that comes up a little bit in movies and it's not like you're ever going to forget what happened, but it does really desensitize it so that you can think about it and it won't consume you. Did that kind of make sense? Okay, great. Yeah, it's like there's more to it. It's just, yeah, it's hard to explain in one really long sentence.
Up with how you described it, Dev. And I had only really abstractly heard about it before Dev started doing it. So very cool.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Amazing. I have one more question. Do you
believe in, no, just kidding.
you use the term attachment styles in your practice too? Does that always correlate to an early childhood relationship with a primary caregiver?
So I will say this. There's a lot of work and studying you can do on attachment style. I haven't done enough of it yet. So I would not say like, I've done so much work in acceptance commitment therapy, a lot of work in EMDR, not as much in attachment styles. But they are like now more and more, like you said, it's such a spectrum, right? It used to be like just secure, just anxious, just avoidant. And it's really come a long way since then. Again, like what I like about attachment styles is the more that you learn about it, the more you're aware of your own. the more you can like understand like what all we want to do, all our brains wants to do is understand why we act a certain way, right? Or why things impact us. And that's why it's good to know about attachment styles. Yes, we like the research in it is that it's attached to a primary caregiver. Yes. That's most of the research in that. But can I dive deeper into attachment styles with you guys? Much past that? Probably not. But I do know like how they impact you in relationships with this like anxious and avoidant or like, and like, but mostly for me with my clients, it's kind of like versus giving them a label of like, you are an anxious avoidant or like you are an avoidant. Or I don't know if many of my clients have a security. I don't know if any of us do at this point, to be honest. I'm some of us do, so I shouldn't say that. But it's more about like, okay, what do you do in conflict? When you are in fight or flight and you fight with your partner, what are your go-tos? What happens? Do you leave? Do you say very mean things? Do you, right? It's more about it's again with this client-centered approach versus kind of the labeling. It's like, okay, what are you doing in fight or flight? And like, what are that? And maybe where did that come from? And then how can we act differently? So it's kind of more about getting into the nuances of the person versus just like, okay, this is your attachment style. I think it's too broad, right? Everything is so gray and every person is so different. And we've all gone through so many things, right? And our stories are so, it's like, so that's why I think it's hard to just label something as one thing.
Yeah, agreed. Awesome. Anyways, weekly affirmations. Are we wrapping this up?
Yeah, let's do it. So the first one we always jump into is we review we set like goals for ourselves. And then first thing we talk about is if we achieved our goal for last week. So obviously you weren't with us last week. So you didn't have
congruent goals?
I would hope so. So mine for last week was obviously, as you both know and our listeners know, I was like in a period of time there where I was looking for a job and it was stressful, and then I ended up getting a job. So my goal for this last week was to just like chill and just enjoy that feeling of feeling secure again, and just like really take things easy. Exactly. And so yeah, actually now thinking about it, I definitely did like physically chill a lot, but I don't think I had like much anxiety. I think I was in homeostasis quite a lot of the time. Sarah was sick, so I just got to like hang out and like take care of her, and that like that for sure aligns with my values. So yeah, big success there. What was yours again, Anthony? I can't remember.
Amazing. Yeah. So my girlfriend's vegetarian. My goal was to have a fully vegetarian week while still hitting my macro goals. Didn't quite do it all, but we did 3 full days and 5 dinners completely veg. So it was good. It was fun. Good challenge. Last night I made artichoke penne pesto. It's good.
Nice.
Yeah.
I also made a pesto, like a pesto pasta dish last night, and all the pesto was homemade from the basil I grew in the garden this last year.
Can you?
I did not make anything last night. I didn't eat last night. Leftover Cactus Club.
Nice.
Yeah, no cooking over here.
So then next up, we always do something that we are grateful for. Mine was a very easy pick for this week. I'm grateful for Emily and the like incredible help she's done for me over the last, whatever it's been, 9 months, maybe even, I think now. It's been a decent amount of time, but yeah, definitely got me out of
you once before, not by name, but Deb was grateful for his therapist in a previous episode.
Oh yeah, I did do it before. Well, yeah, I'm super thankful. Yeah, honestly. Yeah, it just made the biggest difference for me this year. So we'll forever be grateful for all your help. So thank you.
Less touching, but I was really grateful for iCloud backup. Yeah, I'm putting together this poetry anthology just for fun and a creative outlet. And when I got a new phone a couple months ago, I didn't realize this, but like all of my old notes, where some of them had been saved, which just disappeared from my phone. And yeah, iCloud backup, I got them back.
Nice.
That would have put you in a fight or flight immediately.
It would have, yeah.
Scary. Yeah, I'm glad you got them back. Yeah.
Yeah, in the moment. Can you come up with something you were grateful for this last week?
Yeah, of course. I'm grateful for something like every minute of the day. I could do this for the next hour. Just the opportunity to talk to you guys about, I love pushing myself into situations that make me feel uncomfortable. This definitely makes me feel uncomfortable because just with a maladaptive belief of being too much, it's like putting yourself out there is scary, right? So it's one thing to be in a room one-on-one. It's another thing to do something like this. And But I do appreciate moments of feeling uncomfortable because I don't want to get stuck in kind of like my, again, like I said, just like your like go-to schedule or in autopilot. And this definitely took me out of autopilot. And so I'm really grateful for that. And I'm grateful that, I'm grateful that I'm on this. I'm grateful that I meet two new people with two very different points of view and different ways that your brains work, because it always makes me better. Everything we talk about, every question I get, every time we talk about mental health, there's no way it's not going to make me a better therapist, better person. I love talking about this stuff. So I'm grateful for this very moment.
Amazing.
Awesome. What do you have next? Oh, our moment of delight. So we initially started this off as like moment of awe, because that was something that, but then Anthony was reading a thing or listening to a podcast or something, and it talked about delight instead, which was just a little bit easier for him to wrap his head around. Because awe can seem like a lot sometimes, where it's like trying to find something that like really leaves you awestruck. Yeah. But my moment of delight for this week was my parents came back into town, and I ended up just like kind of out of the blue having some like really great just like chats with my dad. And that was the first thing that popped into my mind about like moments of delight. It was just so nice. We ended up talking about sort of the typical things that we do talk about, like sports and whatever, but then ended up having some deeper conversations as well. And yeah, it was like really cool. And as I said, it was the first thing I thought of when I thought about moment of delight in the last week. So yeah, that was mine.
I love that.
Amazing. I really delighted in watching Bryson DeChambeau break 50 for the first time. That was fun.
We always got to bring it back to golf. There it is.
Yeah, that's the first time we mentioned golf this session.
This weekend.
It took us an hour and 6 minutes when we got
But
there.
I also have a family member who is navigating a sobriety journey right now. So
Wow.
I've been delighting in helping out with those conversations a little bit.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, amazing.
Again, I could have so many.
This is your bread and butter.
What's a fun one? So at the clinic, I'm always trying to like have fun and kind of like mess around a little bit. I always think like, as adults, we start to, I don't even think I like the term adulting, but I think like we lose that kind of childlike wonder and like, really noticing the little things and playing and having fun. So I've started to prank some of my employees, and like we are all 30s and 40s, and they're starting to prank me back. Their pranks are terrible, but still, like they're not working. But it's still, I got to tell you about this one because it's so funny. So I moved one of my employees' trucks, but just like one spot, 2 spots over, because they park in the same space the entire time. So it's funny. And then I said that I didn't do it. Speaking of gaslighting, and he cut that out. So then I didn't even know, it was so funny. He said like he went into my car and turned on my windshield wipers and my blinkers and turned my music up high. And like, again, I'm neurodivergent, so I definitely believed I did all those things in the car. And I was like, oh, I must have my windshield wipers on and somehow kept my blinker on. That's kind of weird. And like, I always have my music blasted full blast, so I didn't clock it at all. And so when they said, oh, did you like my prank? I'm like, I don't even know what we're talking about here. Like, if you're going to prank someone who kind of lives in chaos, you can't use chaos.
Yeah.
Like, you probably should have wiped my car down.
Yeah, like clean the car.
But I just think the fun, like the little moments and the fun and like the laughter as adults, I love that stuff.
Amazing. Emily, do you know Dr. Laurie Santos?
Yes, a little bit.
That's where I got the delight from. She was on a Huberman Lab podcast, and
Huberman.
Yeah, talked about the class that she teaches on happiness at Stanford. It's like been their most well-attended class that they've ever done. And just by focusing on delight, it's like you can be present more often rather than a lofty, awe-inspiring thing in your day.
I like it. Yeah. And like that comes back to noticing, right? Like to notice a moment of delight, you have to come back to the moment you're in. Like I think it's great.
Nice. So next one, this is the one that it's kind of, we switched it around, but I wanted to do mood booster this week, if that's cool with you, Anthony.
Yeah.
We forgot to talk about it. But my mood booster for this week, which Anthony, I know you might not agree with, because when I was in Victoria and we were trying to decide on something to do when the weather was shitty, and I said, do you want to like go to a bookstore and get like a tea or something and walk around a bookstore? And you were like, no, I don't want to do that. But that's
just like this, Deb. No, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
That's my mood booster. My wife put me onto it. She absolutely loves it. And yeah, going to get like a little coffee, a little sweet treat, and just like moseying around a bookstore without like any sort of time limit. It's the best. It's so great.
Yeah. I mean, I love getting coffees and sweet treats and walking around. Yeah, I should have said yes.
His moment of regret.
My moment of regret for the week. Yeah. Yes.
I like
Mood
hearing you
booster.
both say sweet treats over and over.
Yeah. Yeah. I drink a lot of coffee and drink a lot of Diet Cokes, but
So do I.
yeah, I picked up a yerba mate gourd, and my mood booster is switching to yerba mates. Kind of cool. You pour the water only into one side of it and sip it out of this metal straw. I feel like Lionel Messi.
Nice.
I think my mood booster will always be laughter, truly. Like laughing with you guys on this podcast. Like Tori and I are always laughing. I hope like when I was home with my family, we're always trying to I love laughing with people that I love. I don't know. I think it's so special and there's so much going on in the world, right? I don't need to dive into that, but if you can find those moments to laugh and to be light, like man, take them and run.
That's a good one. Neither of us have done laughter yet, I don't think.
Good point. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one.
We laugh together a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
We
you
do.
seem like a really highly, just like a chuckles over there.
Definitely.
He's just so committed to homeostasis. He's just like,
I like it.
nothing will influence my mood.
Yeah, I'll get him a shirt. I am in homeostasis.
What's the objective? Yeah. You know, when people always say the pursuit of happiness, it should really be the pursuit of homeostasis. Yeah.
Yes, should it absolutely should. Like that should be our only clip.
Yeah. I've been switching out happiness with peace. Like that's what I'm looking for. But now I'm going to put homeostasis
I
in
like it
instead.
so
Yeah,
much.
a couple extra syllables, but
I just did a presentation in Edmonton for Heart Health Gala. And my dad, it was pretty cool. There was 300 people there. It was very, very neat. But my dad was there. And so so now, like every second day, he'll write me like, that person should have been in homeostasis. Or like, did you watch the news? They weren't in homeostasis. And I'm like, oh my God, like this is going to be for the next 10 years of my life. Like we'll use it like 3-4 times a day. But I kind of like it. I think that's the problem is like, I'm not going to get worn out by it.
no doubt.
Awesome.
Emily, what's your goal for next week?
Oh man, what even is next week? Or I have troubles. What is my goal for next week? I don't know. I don't know why this is the one that's stunting me. I don't know why this is stunting me, guys. This is so great. I'm like so in this, like, can't think of 10 minutes past right now.
Yeah, you're just in the moment.
Next week. I think my goal is I know what it is. That ADHD course, as per usual with my brain, I'm like really been putting it off. And so I just keep thinking like, I'll get it done. And so I just need to really chunk out time for it next week and do it.
Nice.
Jeff?
Mine for this week, which it was funny, it was even before Emily brought up like liking doing things that are maybe a little bit scary or like pushing you beyond stuff. Mine for this week was I want to face some fears. I feel like through all this stuff that's been going on for me, there's definitely some things that I've been living in fear about a little bit, like pushing myself physically and a few other things. So my goal for this week is very vague, but I just want to like face some of those fears. And I think that'll give me a sense of achievement and hopefully set me down a good path for continuing to improve and feel better. So
Any specific fears we can outline here and make this goal a little more operationally definable?
Well, for sure it's like the like exercising component is a scary one for me. That's like the main one. But I know that I've picked like my goal for the week being like movement and stuff a few times before, but this is wanting to push beyond that barrier a little bit more. It's like, I could
your
go
brain
and like
would really try to protect you from that. Hey,
for sure. Yeah. But I think I'm feeling positive other than the fact that I just tweaked my back yesterday and I'm in like a bunch of pain. But once that's a little bit better, then that physical component of facing that fear for sure. And then I'm sure there's some other things like, I don't know, like I talked about earlier, not putting my like total 100% into things like that's a fear. I think there's lots of different fears that I can try and conquer. So I'm going to pick a few and go for it.
Awesome. Ask ChatGPT for a workout routine, just like a really reduced one. You can even just, like ask for a golf focused workout routine.
The one thing that I would really, really like to do, and I just think it might take me a little while to build up to it again, but is to get into like another really solid yoga routine. I know when I was doing that, like on a really regular basis, like going 3-4 times a week to classes, that was like, I probably had the best like rounded health because things like, I mean, I've always had like a weak core because I have strong legs, and then that leads to my back issues and stuff. So it's always helped with that. So I'm going to start there.
My goal for next week is to book a therapy session.
Nice. Love to hear it.
Actually, just appropriate timing. I got an email. TELUS Health offers 3 free sessions to all men in BC right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
We buried the lead.
Yeah, I know. That just came out a couple of days ago. Yeah.
It's so great.
Yeah. So we'll start there.
Cool.
Love it. That's so great.
Yeah,
I love
it's
it too.
full circle. Tied it up
Full
in a
circle.
bow. Yeah.
I will say too, before we sign out, that Emily, I do really enjoy your content on Instagram. If anybody's looking for little like reminders of things, I find it's definitely nice. It'll just like trigger a little memory for me, like, oh yeah, be in the moment. If you like put out a little video or whatever about that. So I think your handle is with Emily, right?
Perfect.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
at with Emily, but Emily is spelled EMELEIGH.
Wow. Oh, yeah.
I can read it on the
Way.
screen.
I was impressed. Yes, that is how.
But yeah, follow Emily, give her a follow for sure if you're our 20 people out there listening. Hopefully we'll bump those numbers off here in our off season when we're going to try and focus more on promoting the pod than putting out new episodes, and then ready to come back better than ever for season 2, whenever that may be.
Dad, what I'll have to say about that truly is like, it's so brave and courageous to do. It's fucking scary to have people be able to comment on you. Podcasts are terrifying, and like, you're doing something really scary, and like, you guys are going to missay stuff. I missay stuff. The world missays things, right? And I'm just always focused on how proud you should be for doing this and like actually putting yourself out there. And yeah, like, I commend you for that. That would be terrifying.
The scariest part is people listening that we know, and those I think are the only people listening. So we've already done the scary part.
Exactly. It's not going to get any worse.
Yeah, I don't care about people I don't know. Whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me.
It was unreal to meet you, Emily. Thanks so much for taking the time out of your billable hours to chat with us. Armchair expert.
Yeah, you guys are I'm going to send Dev an invoice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll talk to you guys later.
Okay, thanks, Emily.
Bye.